Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today we have creator Brad Neufeld of the Resilience Talk Network. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me, Gene and Sheena.
Yes, and Sheena is my co-host today. Thanks, Sheena, for coming on.
Yep. Thank you, Gene.
So, Brad, tell us about like the early days. What was the young Brad about?
Oh boy. How long are your shows, Gene?
Thanks,
I'll give
everyone,
you.
for watching.
I'll give it the readers. I'll give it the Reader's Digest version. But
That's right.
I was born. Let's just start there because this has been a journey that has led up to this, and I feel like I'd like to explain how it all came to be. I was born in a little town in California. Well, it was a small town at the time, Bakersfield, back in the early 60s. So that'll kind of tell you how old I am. But growing up in Bakersfield was it was something else. Not gonna lie, it was a smaller town then, but it's grown tremendously since then. But when I was at the age of 13, we had an event in our life that kind of changed the direction I was going in. It was my parents had some financial challenges, and we ended up losing everything. So what happened literally in the middle of the night, I was at a friend's house, and I came home about 10:30 at night walking home, and here's this big moving van parked out in front of my house. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? I go inside, and my father was just finishing up having a meeting with my other brothers and sisters. And basically they said, we've lost everything. We need to leave, and we need to leave tonight. So literally I went from thinking I'm going to school the next day to loading up a van, and we tuck-tailed and ran all the way to Alabama, all the way across the United States. And we ended up living with some friends of our family down in Alabama, a little tiny town called Thomaston. And we were on a 4,000 acre soybean farm. And so, and it was interesting, the dynamics or the environments that were so different, because Bakersfield was like little kid, you pull your bike up to a 7-Eleven, you lay it down, go in, buy a candy bar, come out, it's gone, right? You go to the mall and you strap your bike on with a bike chain to the rack there at the mall. You come back out, the only thing that's there is the bike frame. The tires are all gone. You leave your garage open for 5 minutes, your tools are all gone. That was the environment I was in Bakersfield. And then I go to Alabama, and here's this family that's like leaves their keys in their cars, leaves their windows open and things. And I told Mr. Frank down there, that was his name, that's what I called him. I said, Mr. Frank, I cannot believe you leave your keys in your car. You can't do that. Somebody's going to steal it. And to this day, I will never forget the reaction on his face. He just paused and looked at me, and he says, well, Brad, my neighbor might need to borrow my car while I'm gone. And my brain just instantly about blew up. I'm like, this doesn't compute, So I went from one environment to the total opposite there, and it was great. So I was there for quite a few years, for about 3 years.
And so, Brad,
and then we ended up all getting back together, getting our legs underneath us, and that's when our family moved here to Utah. So I've been here since I was like 15 and a half, middle of my sophomore year. And so then I had the transition of coming here to Utah. And growing up here, there's so many stories here, but I promise you I'll keep it short. But I grew up here. I ended up serving a mission in Tokyo, Japan. That was back from 84 to 86. And then after that, here was another pivotal point in everything that I was going through. I was a blue collar worker. I wanted to be a farmer. I loved farming, and that just wasn't happening here in Utah. We just didn't have the money to buy another farm and get it started. My father was an accountant. He worked for one of the oil companies here in Salt Lake. And I was just grew up being a blue collar worker, truck driving, worked for a frozen food company, working in their warehouse, and just wasn't going anywhere. And I didn't know what, I was feeling bad because I felt like my livelihood had been taken away. I wasn't part of the clubs and all this stuff. And I was just feeling like, why in the world did God, why is this my life? Why why didn't I get to have the same upbringing as most kids? Because I had to work full time on the farm. I was literally working 70 hours a week and going to school. So that was my teenage years. And so while I was like, why did this all happen? Well, then I had a friend in my ward who happened to work at a youth crisis center. It was called Utah Boys Ranch at the time. It's a different name now, but it was a facility, for an inpatient facility for troubled youth. And he asked me just to come volunteer and just throw the football and everything. Well, I did that. And as I was, about 6 or 7 weeks after being there and getting to know the boys and having a good time and all of this, I had one of their therapists come to me and say, "Are you Brad Neufeld?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I need you to stop talking to these boys." "Why, may I ask?" "You're screwing up their treatment plans." And I'm like, "What's a treatment plan?" I had no idea. And he says, "You got to stop giving advice to these kids. You're not a licensed therapist." And I'm like, "Oh, they're just asking me questions. I'm telling them stories about my upbringing. What in the world? Why?"
Yeah, you're just being a human.
I'm just being a human being.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And then so I did what they said, and I'd still go there, but I'd stop talking to them. And then the boys were like, "Brad, what's wrong with you? Why won't you talk to me?" And I told them why. And one of the boys just went, "I hate therapists. They're all the same." All this. I'm like, going, "Wait a minute, dude. Don't look at it that way. You're here for a reason." And so I would still talk to him. And then I had another therapist come to me and say basically the same thing, that he was going to turn me into the state for practicing therapy without a license. And I'm going, what am I doing? I'm not giving advice. But then, light bulb went off. Maybe all this stuff happened to me for a reason. Maybe it was for this very thing right here, so I could help the youth of the nation. And so I ended up going into to that business, into social work. So I did that.
In a way, you felt called to do that.
Mm-hmm.
In a way.
Absolutely. And I have a wonderful career with it. And so, again, a lot of things in between there. But then how I got started in, my journey to starting Resilience is when I was in Southern Utah. I had a government contract with the state of Utah, with the Department of Workforce Services. And that was from, about 2001 to about 2005, somewhere in there. But anyway, I was on Mike McGarry's show down in Southern Utah on AM 890 KDXU down there. In the morning, he had a talk show every morning from like 7 to 10 or something like that. And he asked me to come on and just talk about the programs that we were doing down there. And I did that. Then the station manager.
What did you think about it when he asked you? Did you think, "Oh, I'm not a radio guy," or anything like that?
Oh, let me tell you this, Gene. You're gonna love this, because I was a public speaker. Okay, I started that very, very early on. Matter of fact, it started at that facility. I had the boys ask me to speak at their graduation ceremony, and I was so nervous when that happened. But anyway, I started doing a lot of public speaking. So I was thinking, no big deal. When he asked me, I just thought, how exciting. But the night before I went on the air, I was literally in a closet in the fetal position, sucking my thumb, saying, "I can't do this. I can't. I don't know why." I'm like, "You've been in front of people, Brad," but I just had this feeling of, what if I say something and it's just out there to the world? Oh my gosh, there's so many people and all this. I was so darn nervous. I didn't sleep at all that night. And then I was on there and I asked Mike if we could record it so I could listen to it afterwards. And normally I'm like this, bubbly, full of energy, let's go, let's knock them dead kind of thing. And he asked me, he goes, "Brad, I hear your program is really exciting. The kids really love it." Well, Mike, yeah, it is an exciting program. And yes, we're doing a lot of good. I mean, that's how I was like, oh my gosh, I sounded like, anyway, low energy and all this stuff. But
I think I hear a lot of people say that when you start out slow like that, it takes a while to find your voice.
Yes, right? It does.
Probably.
To have a comfort zone, to be able to express yourself in a way that you feel comfortable with and that the audience can resonate with.
Yeah. And so I'd advise anybody, when you get started, you're gonna go through the same things I'm going through. Gene, you probably went through the same thing. Sheena, same thing. You just gotta start. It'll get better as you go. And
She
so
was a pro from the beginning.
Yep, it was.
Oh.
And so we did that show, and it was like 3 weeks later, I had the station manager, I believe it was Brian Hyde at the time. He came to me and he says, "Brad, I love your voice. You have a good radio voice. Have you thought about doing a talk show?" And actually, that was kind of on my bucket list. I was a big
Cool.
listener to AM talk shows and things like that. So I thought, okay, yeah, let's give it a shot. And that was another experience because I would think, okay, I've got to talk for an hour. I'm live on the air. How am I going to do this? And so I literally, for my first show, prepared about what I considered to be about 2.5 hours worth of material so that I would have enough to talk about. Well,
About what year was that?
guess what? Yeah, I zipped through it and I still had 12 minutes of airtime to go.
About what year? About what year did you start that show?
I started that show in 2003.
2003. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I,
Yeah, so you had a lot of time left. How
yeah, I had a lot of time left.
then?
Yeah, and I was like, what in the, yeah,
Just
so
like
like
grab a
giving
book
talks
and
in
start
church.
reading.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
had to learn a little bit about the radio world to talk naturally, to not just, you're not just reading a script, because that's basically what I was doing, was just reading all my lines there, and it went pretty quick. But I had to learn to pause and, all right, let's really look at this point right here. Take a minute to think about it. You know, I learned the technique of that I'm not just talking into a microphone, I'm actually talking to an audience. So once I put it into a format in my head of I'm in front of an audience and I'm interacting, that's when I was able to.
Did you have any role models you were trying to pattern yourself after?
Oh, Rush Limbaugh. I never wanted to talk
yeah.
the politics route, but I just loved what I admired about Rush was he would just come up with things that people weren't really putting out there, weren't thinking about. I'm like, how does he come up with all these subjects, or how does he take all of this gobbledygook, come up with his own opinion and bring it all together and just help it make sense? And that's what I was very impressed with him about.
The main thing is he had guests or callers call in, and it was the caller's responsibility to make him look good. So,
absolutely. Remember that?
So,
yeah, he would say that. He would say that all the time. He goes,
all of my guests,
if you don't make me look good, right?
All of my guests make me look good as well. So.
Yes, that's right. Very good. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And so, yeah, he was a big, and back then, Dr. Laura, I don't know if you remember her or not. She's been out of the limelight for a while. Dr. Laura was on right after him, and I loved her, how she was just fiery. People would call in. Some of them, she'd rip them a new one. Other ones, she was very kind and gentle. And that was the industry I was in, was the mental health industry. So I thought, all right, I want to formulate my messaging around that, around self-help, about helping people solve challenges. But I didn't want to be the one that did the yelling and screaming and made them feel bad and all that stuff.
You wanted to always be calm and on an even keel.
Yeah. But then you discover this as you go too. People like that controversy. They like that. That's actually what keeps them riveted a lot of times to listening. And so it's like, oh my gosh, just to do a straight educational type podcast or straight educational type broadcast like that on the radio, they don't get very many followers. It's the entertainment and the controversy that keeps people coming back. And so that's always been a struggle for me, and it still is to this day. I don't want to go down that route, but man, sometimes you got to do it to get listeners, for sure.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's the human interest. People like to, have those things, I think, that they can either relate to or, like put themselves into that mindset of like, whoa, I can't believe somebody would say that to someone else. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And so the next step after that, lo and behold, we ended up having some of the best numbers they'd ever had on a Saturday show. And he was open with me. He says, we literally have no listeners on the weekend. And once our show started, my show wasn't doing very well right off the bat. Again, I had to kind of play around with it. And because like when we'd have a call, we'd open it up to callers, there were no calls. And it was like, okay, is anybody even listening? And he had to tell me, yeah, not really. We're just being fillers here. But I thought, no, I want to make sure we get listeners here. So I ended up hiring or bringing on a co-host. Her name was Jenny Cannon. and we changed the name of the show from the Brad Neufeld show to what was a local resource radio. So we would talk to people about community resource radio was what it was. So we had that title there, and basically we would advertise that and say, listen to us on Saturday. There are resources in your area that you know nothing about, and they could be helping you right now. Don't feel all alone. Come listen to our show, and we'll have those people on there. So we'd have people from the police, from the health department, from Department of Workforce Services come on and be guests and all that. And it ended up being very, very resourceful, and people loved it.
I thought earlier you were going to say that you were going to hire callers.
Oh,
I joked that I will, mow somebody's lawn if they will subscribe to my channel. That thought came to my mind.
Well, will you fly to Utah? No, never mind.
I will.
I'm already subscribed. I'm already subscribed to your channel, so we're good there.
There you go.
So, but then, in the midst of all of that, after a nice 2.5-year run, all of a sudden, the station down there sold out to Bonneville Communications, and they just flat out didn't care that we had the highest ratings on the weekend. They didn't care. They just said, we have our own programming. We're going to do it. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. It was like, instant. Boom, we're off the air. Jeez. And it was like, and of course I'd get people, Brad, where's your show? Blah, blah, blah. And I'd have to tell them, well, I'm going to call in and complain. Didn't do any good. But then I ended up moving up here to northern Utah. Our contract ran out down there, so I moved up here to start another project. And I was still having the desire to be on the radio, so I happened to find out about an internet-based radio station, and this was in 2006. And this was when the internet station was brand new. There was only like 3 of them in the whole world, and one of them happened to be here in Orem, Utah. It was the Grapevine Talk Radio Network, and I got on there, and that was another thing, just starting all over again. Didn't know where the audience was coming from, and I ended up having about a 3-year run, and I figured out later on with that, because I had basically the same format, but again, no callers, no nothing. I didn't know if anybody was even listening to me, so I kept massaging it until I found the right mix, and ended up ran into a gentleman at a book signing club, or book signing convention. His name was Andy LaRusso. He's the singing chef. If you look him up, Andy LaRusso, the singing chef. I happened to meet him, and he was selling his book, and he's on all the cooking networks and everything. And I told him about my show, and he says, well, Brad, can I be on your show? And I was like, well, Andy, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think I have any listeners. And he said, well, let's change that. Let me on your show. And we did an interview. Yeah, we did an interview. And he took the link, and it wasn't a link. I had to send him the sound file, and he actually put it on his website and put it out there. And next thing I know, I'm getting some callers and some emails, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I thought, lather, rinse, repeat. Let me start interviewing book authors. So that's what I did. I interviewed a lot of them, and next thing I know, I'm on this list out of New York, and I'm getting like 17 to 20 books a week mailed to me. I want to be on your show. I want to be on your show. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it happened all over again,
That's right.
And I was getting
singing chef provided the keys
for
your show to rise.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And it just took time. But in that, it was like the last 6 months of the show, I was getting callers from Australia, I think I had one from Iran. That was kind of interesting. But at any rate, same thing happened. I go there one day, and there's a chain on the door. Basically, the door's locked up with we are out of business. And I'm like, nobody told me anything. Boom, gone. And so here we go. I know it's been a lot of dialogue to get up to this moment, but at that moment right there, I said, I am going to start my own radio station someday. I'm going to do whatever I can to do that. And that way, nobody can take us off the air. Well, then immediately, literally after that, I'll just give you the short version of that too. I had an incident where I ended up getting what's known as a brain abscess. I had an infection in my head. And it was ended up being a strep virus, and it was growing, and it was putting a lot of pressure. It's growing at the back of my head and putting a lot of pressure on my brain and actually pushing it forward. And so I had to go in and get surgery for it. They couldn't tell what it was when they first started looking, and so they had to go do some exploratory surgery. But they ended up having to, like I say, cut the back of my head open and get that infection out of there. But then soon after that, the infection ended up going down into my spine. So I got spinal meningitis. I ended up losing my sight at that time too. I couldn't see. It was just, everything was just a big blur. And at that moment, I was really like, God, what is this my life? It feels like every time I'd get on a roll, I'd just be knocked down. And now this. And the other aspect to that too was I wasn't able to get back on the radio. It was like, I'm still suffering from some of it. I get these pauses here where the brain's not functioning all the way. It's getting better, obviously, but I wasn't able to do anything like this. Wasn't able to do any public speaking, nothing, because if I thought, I know this is going to sound weird, if I thought too hard, my brain would just like be on fire, and literally it would I just had to not think for a while to and let my brain heal. And so that was kind of a big.
Did you do anything like meditation or counseling in
Oh
order?
yes, I did everything, Gene. I did everything, and the doctor ended up even putting me on fluoxetine, not for depression, but to balance out the chemicals in my brain, because I just had a lot of racing thoughts and stuff like that.
Did anything seem to help more than the other?
Well, the fluoxetine helped a lot. But it was still, I couldn't go very much because I was in the middle of writing books. I had 6 books that I had started. I, again, wanted to get back out there to do, to do some public speaking. And there was just no way. It wasn't happening. Just wasn't happening. So that kind of took me off the map for a while. But then I had another checkup about the time I started resilience here. And the doctor just told me, Brad, he gave me this news here. He says, the brain injury that you had, he said, I have never seen anybody live past 6.5 years.
Wow.
And the fact that you're still alive at year 10 is just a miracle. And I just went, and he said, after they did the CAT CT scans and everything, they found out my brain was actually healing. And he said, still take it easy and don't do too much. But yeah, he says, you're good to go. Your brain looks like it's healing and everything. And so I was like, okay, let's get something started here. But as I mentioned
before COVID.
Oh yeah. And speaking of that, just one quick thing, I never got it. My doctor, he wouldn't even let me take the shot. He said, no, we're not going to do that again. We're not going to jeopardize anything. He says, just don't take the shot. And you can only imagine the abuse I got. What? You're not going to take the shot? My doctor told me not to. Oh my gosh, let's not get into that. But anyway,
that's right. So what was like the month like leading up to starting resilience?
That I just had the feeling of, it's time to do it. But I didn't have.
Were you mapping it out? Were you writing in a notebook? What were you doing?
Writing in a note. Oh, I'm a yellow pad guy. I've got 3 of them sitting right here. I'm a yellow pad guy. I bust out my yellow pad. I always keep it beside my bed too. Because I'll wake up in the middle of the night with a thought. Oh my gosh, what about this? What about this? And I don't know if you've been through that before, where you have those thoughts and you think, oh, I'll write it down in the morning. You go back to sleep and then you forget it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to write without even being able to look. So I at least have a starting point to refresh my thoughts there.
Right. And then, so you decided to kick off your new network.
Yes. Decided I'd get it started. And so we did. It was, I actually did it in conjunction with, I don't know if you're familiar with the author, Richard Paul Evans. He wrote The Christmas Box House. Yeah, he's written 46 New York Times bestsellers. Wow. Most people don't know about him, but he's brilliant. And the Michael Vey series, I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's his doings too. But anyway, I was teamed up with him, and he was doing a project known as the Tribe of Kings. It was a men's group that was just formed to be basically a force in the world to do a lot of good. And I was telling him, because he wanted this to be a worldwide thing. And I said, well, Richard, this thing's not going to go unless you've got, information streaming out of this building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not going to happen. And I said, I've been in the radio business and I can help you set up a studio right here. He thought about it for months. And then he just came back to me one day and says, Brad, take this room, the studio, make it happen. Okay. Well, again, Tribe of Kings. So it was initially called Kings Radio. This was only for a short period of time, Kings Radio, and we got it started. And then the things shifted a little bit where he wanted to have it be in a different genre, so more of a self-help. And he had come up with a concept, and I'll just put it out there. The five kingdoms is what he's going to be right. He's writing a book on that here in the next little while, in the next couple of years. And so that'll be out there. It's a really cool self-help model. And so we actually changed it to Five Kingdoms Radio. And then Richard came to me and he says, the timing's not right yet on this, Brad. Go ahead and just excuse me, keep the station going, but it's all yours. Do with it as you want. And then I was sitting there debating, well, do I go forward with Five Kingdoms Radio? And as I put the word out there, people were like, Brad, what is this? Is this some kind of a cult? Is it some kind of a new religion? Is it some kind of like, all right, it's not going to go. It's not going to go where I want it to with this name. And so I had already had the Resilience Talk Network in the back of my mind, and there it was. And as I told both of you before the show, it started out because, again, I didn't do too many of the podcasts because, again, I'm still struggling with my thought process. So I was doing podcasts for other people, and they were audio only at the time. And so we did close to, I think, 700 podcasts that we had put out at one time. But then we had
were those a bunch of different podcasters?
Yeah, and people
what was the most number of podcasters sort of going at once?
People that I was doing podcasts for was around 15.
15.
Wow.
15 different people. And it ranged everything from, again, self-help to fatherhood to relationships to insurance. I was doing podcasts for a mortgage broker. He wanted to put some tips out there on how to do mortgages right and all of that. So I was just experimenting with all kinds of different things. But then when it came down to it, as I mentioned to you, Gene, it was like I didn't have an identity. People would get on there and they'd see, Resilience Talk Network. Well, what are you? Are you a mortgage broker? Are you what is it?
Get you confused with the identities of the podcasters.
Of all of the different podcasts. Right. And so then I thought, okay, this is, as hard as it was for me to say, guys, this isn't going to happen anymore. It was very hard. I had a lot of friends, and we had a couple of podcasts on there about addiction and fentanyl poisoning and all this stuff. We really were, I thought, doing some good stuff, but it was all kind of tainting what I wanted resilience to be, which is resilience is the ability to overcome any challenge that you're faced with and go on and get your goals in life. And that's what it takes in today's society to do that. And it's getting harder and harder with all the chaos that's going on. So I wanted this to be a show where people can call in and have, to give them the hope that they need to continue to pursue to get their goals and dreams. So.
Yeah. So it's like do it yourself or self-help with help.
That's right. I want to make sure you follow through. A matter of fact, when I do podcasts for anybody, because I know if you go research like on Spotify and just look at random podcasts, most people have how many on there? Between 2 and 5, and that's it. They don't know how to keep it going. They don't know how to create content. They don't know how to keep their message relevant. They don't know how to get their word out there.
Yeah. And
so I started teaching people that, and I'll tell them when I first start with them, if this is just going to be a temporary quick thing, then go ahead. You're more than willing to do it yourself. I'll show you how to do it. But if you want to work with me, you've got to be committed long term. Otherwise, I can tell you right now, it's not going to go where you think it is.
That's right. You say, first, get yourself a yellow pad and a pencil.
Exactly.
Keep it by your bedside.
Oh, and I'll say, let's plan your first 20 shows right now. And whoa, brain explosion. Well,
that's interesting. Yeah. I actually used AI to
whatever works, Gene. Whatever works.
To say, I prompted, plan, the first 10 episodes, and it gave me 10 really good episodes, which I probably have only done 2 of, but it was a good starting place. It was a way to help my mind, go. And so anyway, I have to look at that again and see if I could do any of those other shows because some of them were pretty good ideas, but I didn't have the bandwidth, to do it in the beginning, to do some of those suggestions. But AI is going to help a lot of people.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So a lot of ways that'll even write your shows for you. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever go to that, but
when did you start coming on to do like your own show? Are you doing your own show?
Yeah,
now?
I've always done it sparsely. The challenge I've had is getting, again, I'm an old radio guy, so my mindset is still I've got to do something on a consistent basis daily. But again, the money wasn't here at the beginning. I didn't know how I would fund this thing, and so I've had to do other jobs to keep going, and so I wasn't able to do it consistently. But I'm finally in a position where I'm semi-retired here, so I can do this on a regular basis. Matter of fact, we just started our lives this Connie. When did we start? On Monday or Tuesday? Yeah, we've got 2 under our belt so far. We've got the daily lives that we're doing, and they're only 15 to 20 minutes long at this point. But I eventually see it turning into a show that lasts two hours or so, where people can send in questions. And this was another thing I did on my old radio show where I'd have people email me with questions and things like that, and I would go over and explain what they could do, give them some suggestions on the radio. And I want to recreate that. So
crowdsourcing content.
That's what we're doing now. So,
Sheena, I think it's time for your question.
Yeah. So what projects are you involved in now?
Well, I am. There are some other people that I'm still helping with their podcasts. And so I have a complete studio here where I do editing, and I'll do the recording, editing, and then I'll also post all of their stuff for them. I do that as part of my services here. That's one of the money.
So you do it all under the same umbrella. You don't have like another business that's called something.
It's all I started doing it, with Premier Podcasting. I started with some different things, but it just felt right to just do it all under the same umbrella. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
So
and where do people find your shows?
They can find them anywhere anywhere where you find podcasts. You can also, our main page is YouTube. You go to YouTube, it's Resilience Talk with Brad Neufeld, or you can go to my website. It's Resilience Talk Network, resiliencetalknetwork.com. You can get on there and that'll tell you about all the services that we do. And as far as my podcast, I love to interview book authors or people who have had stories where they've overcome great odds to become, who they are. And matter of fact, one of my recent interviews was with somebody who was abused sexually, mentally, everything. As she was younger, she was in the foster care system, bounced from house to house. And her story is just so heart-wrenching. You're familiar with that book, A Kid, was a Child Named It?
Oh God, I read that when I was a teenager.
Yeah, it's almost the same. It's almost the same story. And here she is all these years later. Yeah, here she is. She's the executive director of the Christmas Box House, which has worked with over, I believe, 200,000 children who have had to escape some pretty, it tears me up every time, the good that they're doing.
What's her name?
Her name is Celeste Edmonds. Her book is called, it's a catchy title, The Garbage Bag Girl.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, look it up. She just put out a book back in December, The Garbage Bag Girl, and her podcast is on my link there on YouTube. You can find it, Celeste Edmonds. It's anyway, just to see who she is now and how how strong she is, and it's just very
perfect model for resilience.
Yes. Never quit. You never know who you're going to help later on in your years. You just never know.
That's right. I have interviewed a few authors, but the books that they wrote were like a year or 2 or 3, or more ago. Mm-hmm. And I finally got a guy who his book's coming out this summer. And I was just like, hey, come on my show and we'll talk about your book. And then he came back, send me your email and I'll have my publicist send you an advanced copy. And it's like, whoa, my first advanced copy's coming pretty soon.
I had one of those just yesterday. A lady named Donna Davis, DB Dawes is her author name. But yeah, I had one of those yesterday. That's awesome, Gene. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so we're going to provide, as many links in our description as we can for the the content that you've mentioned, and to your, links to your show and stuff like that. And let's see, Sheena, is any other question in your mind about how he's doing these things? Because since you're a new podcaster, you might have some. What would a new podcaster ask a seasoned vet?
Oh man.
Go for it, Gina.
Like everything, huh?
Yeah, I don't know anything, Brad. I don't know anything.
Yeah,
I'm,
Yeah, and
oh
I'm
yeah,
not
go
doing
ahead,
this.
please.
I was just saying I'm not doing this for a sales pitch or anything, but I understand because people have that desire in them. They have this message in them, and they want to get it out there. And so the podcast coaching that I do, it's pretty significant, and people's eyes are opened huge when I run these things by them, when if they don't know the behind the scenes stuff and what it takes and what they're about to get themselves into. Gene, you had mentioned something in one of our prior conversations about people put themselves out there and they get some negative feedback, and it blows me away to this day. I can put the most positive things out there, and you would not believe the vile things people will put in the comments. It just, what is,
Some politicians called those nattering nabobs of negativism.
Keyboard warriors. That's the name I've heard crop up there. But it just surprises me how many people just want to destroy.
Do you have like an initial consultation package?
Yes, I do. It's a free initial consultation.
Nice.
We go for half hour to an hour, and I'll show you. I call it just an introduction to podcasting. I love to do that for anybody, just to show them the ins and outs. And I like to warn them up front. You might be discouraged after you hear this, but at the end, I'm going to say, no, it's best that you know this. So therefore, you'll have a good foundation on what it takes. So you'll get everything right in place so that you will be able to do it long term.
I'm wondering if Sheena could invite you to her podcast.
Okay.
A little session together.
Absolutely.
And you'll benefit from it, and you'll be able to, have it down in a podcast, and it'll help everybody. Synergy.
Hook me up. Yeah. If you want to put a group together, I'll gladly come on and do it for you. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That'd be amazing.
Podcasting 101.
Again, that's really at the heart of what I do. That was the thing with radio. After I lost my show, I would go to all these radio stations like here in Salt Lake, and it was the same thing. We have our programming. We don't care. We don't want your stuff. We don't care. We don't want to listen to it. And I'm like, how do people get a message out? And all these people have all of these experiences that could be put out there to help others. There's no medium for them to get it out there. So I wanted to provide that. So that's why I do that, Sheena and Gene. That's why I do that, so I can help people get started.
That's right. Labor of love.
Because that's what it is.
You love resilience, and you love messaging, and you love the bravery that people have that want to have a thought, express it publicly, and withstand the criticism that maybe is out there. That is a brave thing. That's what we're all about at Ladder Daily Digest. And thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Sheena, now I got an extra idea for a show for you.
I'm serious, Sheena. Put a group together.
No, yes.
We'll connect you guys for sure.
Oh God, that'd be great.
And I can't wait to watch that as well, so I can learn some things, but part of my job is to help other people, right? So I'm doing it.
And thank you for the opportunity, Gene. Thank you, Sheena.
It's so great to chat with new people.
That's amazing.
We're all humans, flying around the sun on a rock, third rock from the sun, and helping each other out has helped humans survive for eons, right? And so we got to keep that going. And thanks everybody for watching. Like and subscribe, and check out the links that we have in the description. Thanks so much, Sheena and Brad, and everybody have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome.